Hello, everybody. Welcome to our presentation. My name is Nina Hogrebe, and I'm a professor for education at the University of Applied Sciences, Hamburg. And besides teaching students to become early educators, I'm currently conducting a research project on segregation in early childhood education and care institutions.
Hello, I'm Stefan Schulder, and I'm a research assistant also at the University of Applied Science in Hamburg, and I'm working in the project of Nina Hogrebe.
My name is Anna Pomykaj. I'm a research assistant at the University of Münster, and I have been involved in the data analysis when the project was affiliated to the University of Münster.
Together, we will now present some findings on segregation in early childhood education and care in Germany. Early childhood education and care, in short ECEC, is believed to support children's individual development and to contribute to educational equality by being especially effective for disadvantaged children. Context studies show that most positive effects are realized in mixed groups, whereas a concentration of children from underprivileged or disadvantaged families disparage learning outcomes. But early education is also considered to serve social inclusion and democracy more generally. ECEC enrollment can be seen as a first step into society, and from that perspective, it is important that children and their families are socialized in contexts of diversity. Segregation, which can be defined as an unequal distribution of population groups resulting from spatial differentiation, sorting and separation processes, counteracts both aims. Despite its relevance, only a few studies explicitly address segregation in ECEC. There is some research from the US that shows that nationwide about 30% of preschoolers in public school-based programs attend racially isolated non-white preschools, which is schools with 90% or more of students of color. But there are great differences between states, with New York, for example, being segregated the most. Also, often children are clustered in pre-K classrooms that are both high minority and high poverty. However, these results cannot easily be transferred to other countries due to differences in demographic structures and programs. For example, targeted programs like Head Start are far less heterogeneous as they serve economically disadvantaged students, unlike universal programs in Germany. There is not much research for the German context. Educational effectiveness studies that consider preschool composition show ethnic segregation with differences between 0 and up to 100% of children with German as a second language, for example. Similarly, monitoring reports say that about 30% of the children who do not predominantly speak German at home visit ECEC settings in which more than 50% of all children do not speak German at home either. Local studies show similar results also for social segregation, but these are mostly conducted in the federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia only. Against this background, we explore segregation in Germany using national level data, and in doing so, we also look for possible differences between the federal states. The following analyses are part of a project funded by the Federal Ministry of Education and Research, which we conduct in cooperation with colleagues from the Martin Luther University in Halle-Wittenberg.
First data source we used for our investigations is the National Educational Panel Study, short NEPS. NEPS offers us data from two different studying cohorts and is conducted as a longitudinal study. So we focused for each of these cohorts on one sample wave where we could get the most out of the data. Secondly, we conducted analysis on data from the Early Childhood Education and Care Quality Study in the Socioeconomic Panel, short K2ID. Here we generated one dataset out of two sample waves. In both studies, depending on the sample, in between 165 and over 850 directors as well as educators were asked about composition characteristics in the centers on institution and also group level. The sample of NEP study cohort 1 was generated via the parents handing out questionnaires to the institution and their employees. So the results for this data source might be affected by sample selectivity. From the two studies, we have data of proportions of children in preschools with an origin of language other than German, children with need in language support, a migration background, parent with university degree, children from lower social class, and exempt from fees as an income-related indicator for poverty. To examine the data, first we had a look on descriptive statistics, which gives us a general idea about the distribution for each variable. To compare the data on regional and federal states level, we used graphs, which gives us a great visual support to understand the distributional patterns. To have statistical evidence, we conducted analysis of variances, and to compare on federal states level, we carried out post-hoc tests. This first table shows us information about the proportions on the variables for language and migration background. Each row stands for a different data sample on either institutional or group level. The columns include sample sizes, means, standard deviations, as well as minimum and maximum. The displayed mean values of around 18 to 21% for language other than German, and also 26 up to 30% for children with migration background in preschools are not surprising and consistent with other studies. However, with regard to the standard deviations as well as a minimum and maximum of the proportions, large differences become visible. The high standard deviations of more than 20% and the minimum of 0 and the maximum of about 100% in mostly all samples illustrate that the differences between daycare centers seem to be rather the rule than the exceptions.
This table shows social background characteristics like the proportions on the variables parents with university degree, of children from lower social class, and the proportion of children exempt from fees. The displayed mean values of the variables parents with university degree and children from lower social class are between 24 to 45% and between 10 to 21% respectively. These big differences between the NAP samples might go back on social selective bias data samples for the first cohort. The data for starting cohort seem to be more reliable in this case. The mean value of the proportions of children exempt from fees are about 17%. With regard to the standard deviations, as well as the minimum and maximum of the proportions, large differences are also visible in these three variables. Due to these differences on national level, we have looked at the regional distribution of the proportions. A closer look at the distribution of the variable origin of language other than German in East and West Germany, except of Berlin, provides initial indications of major differences. While the proportion is about 25% in West Germany on institution and group level of both data sources NAPS and K2ID, the proportion in East Germany is just about 2 to 10%. The large differences in the standard deviations again point to more differentiated differences within East and West Germany. Doing analysis of variance in form of one-way ANOVAs, the results also statistically indicate variance heterogeneity between West and East Germany.
For the migration background on regional level, with around 30%, we have much higher proportions for West Germany compared to around 8 and 9% in East Germany. For the NAPS data from starting cohort 2, we even could find a lowest mean of 4%. However, these values must be considered with caution because of the low case numbers of those samples. These results are not surprising because they reflect pretty well the patterns of distribution for children with migration background in German ECEC as displayed in official statistics. The standard deviation is another striking reference that in West German centers, the degree of segregation is much higher than in East Germany. Additionally, the Welch ANOVAs gives us statistical proof for the conducted differences. To gain a better understanding what the distribution for proportions of migration background looks like, we show strip plots for West and East Germany. The y-axis shows us the proportion, and every dot in the strip plots stands for one institution. The box is similar as in box plot and gives us an idea about the median, the first quartile, and third quartile. Additionally, the thin line stands for the mean. If you compare both graphs, the visible patterns support the understanding that in West Germany there are bigger differences in between the preschools, which is a hint for segregation. For East Germany, except of some outliers, there are no huge differences of proportions, while the amount of children with migration background is generally low. For the variables on social characteristics and need of language support, we do not see such differences, which might go back to sample selectivity and more heterogeneous patterns.
Despite the regional differences, we also looked at states level. Because of low case numbers, we concentrated on K2ID data. To show further differences between the single federal states, we conducted post-hoc tests. The results indicate significant differences, especially between West and East German federal states. This box plot illustrates graphically the differences between and within the federal states. While some federal states, especially the East German states and Schleswig-Holstein in North Germany, seem to have a rather homogeneous composition of children's language other than German, this is different in the other West German states. These differences can be observed for this indicator on group level as well. Histograms of the distribution of children's language other than German on institution level show graphically, in accordance to the post-hoc tests and the box plot, similar distributions in East and West federal states of Germany. Berlin seems to have more of a West German state distribution in the selected indicator. The East federal states have a right skewness, which flattens out at a higher proportions. Nevertheless, the West German federal states in particular show some further differences. Some federal states, like Hesse or Berlin, have a flat curve indicating a more equal distribution, and others, like Bavaria and North Rhine-Westphalia, show a broad right skewness, with many settings having lower proportions and some where those children concentrate. These distributions also apply to the distribution of the variable children's language other than German on group level.
To sum up, our study generally shows big differences between the daycare centers' compositions on national, regional, and state level, indicating that segregation is a relevant issue in German ECEC. This applies more to ethnic than social segregation, but we believe that this is rather due to sample selectivity. It is a well-known phenomenon that population groups with a higher educational background or socioeconomic status are more likely to participate in surveys. This might be true for institutional actors as well. Despite the general pattern that there are large differences between the ECEC settings composition, we also find some regional and state level variation. First, segregation is more pronounced in Western Germany, which is not surprising given the different population structures in the respective states. However, this shows that segregation increases in regions with more diversity. This is also visible over time. A local study showed that the differences between daycare centers increased over the years when the proportions of the respective population groups increased in the municipality and vice versa. Consequently, the presence of diversity does not automatically lead to more mixed educational institutions. Quite the contrary, it rather seems to reinforce already existing separation. Here, governance strategies need to be implemented that work as incentives for more diversity. In this regard, the different population patterns of the West German states are interesting. Some states have flatter curves indicating a more uniform distribution. In others, most centers have rather low proportions of disadvantaged children. These mostly concentrate in few settings there. As to the reasons for this, more research is needed on state and also local levels. Thank you for your attention. Please do not hesitate to contact us if you have any questions.